All right, let's dive into a really fascinating legal puzzle. We've got a homeowner, her HOA, and a pretty controversial decision about a community golf course. This whole thing is a story about rules, votes, and a paper trail that got so tangled it had to be sorted out in court. So let's get right into it.
So can your HOA just change the rules without getting a vote? That is the big question at the heart of this whole story. And if you live in a planned community, this might sound a little too familiar. We're going to see exactly how this went down for a homeowner named Kesha Hodge after she decided to take on her HOA board.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're in Phoenix, Arizona, in a place called the Cottonfields Community. Our main players are, on one side, homeowner Kesha A. Hodge, and on the other side, you've got the Cottonfields Community Association. And the battleground, the thing they're fighting over, is all about the rules for the local golf course. And what's so interesting about this whole thing is that the rules seemed super clear, right? There was this core document, an agreement called the REMA, and it basically said the property had to be a golf course or just open space, period. And if you wanted to change that rule, you needed a 2/3 vote from all the homeowners. The whole dispute gets started when the HOA board makes a decision that looks like it just completely bypasses that vote. Now, to really get what happened here, you've got to be willing to follow the paper trail. And trust me, it gets a little messy. This isn't just about one single meeting or decision. It's about this whole tangled web of official filings, and then corrections to those filings, and then withdrawals of the corrections. It all creates this incredibly confusing paper trail.
Okay, so this timeline really shows how things went from a simple disagreement to a full-blown legal battle. It all kicks off in 2011. The HOA board records these revisions to the golf course rules, but they don't get the member vote. So later that same year, probably because they're facing some legal heat, the board files what's called a Notice of Errata. Think of it as them publicly saying, whoops, those revisions we made, they might be void. Fast forward to 2014, and yeah, they're in court with the golf course owner. And then comes the real kicker, July 2015. To settle that lawsuit, the board votes to withdraw that oops notice. And that is the exact moment that triggers our homeowner's complaint.
So you're probably asking, what on earth is a Notice of Errata? Well, in legal speak, it can get complicated, but for our purposes, the best way to think about it is like a public warning label. Seriously, imagine the 2011 rule change as this official document. The HOA basically went and slapped a giant, bright red sticky note on it that says, hey everyone, warning, there might be a big legal problem with this document. The key thing to remember, though, is that the sticky note, it doesn't actually destroy the document underneath. It doesn't fix it or erase it. It just sits there as a warning.
So when Kesha Hodge saw the board vote to just peel off that warning label in 2015, well, that was the last straw. From her perspective, this move was a clear violation of the community's own rules. So she did something about it. She filed an official complaint.
And this quote right here, taken directly from her complaint, really gets to the heart of it all. She's saying that by voting to withdraw those notices of errata, the board was, in effect, letting the golf course owner use the property for something other than open space. And they were doing it even though they never got that required 2/3 vote from the members. It's a powerful claim.
So let's just boil it down. Hodge's entire argument, her whole case, rested on one single idea. That taking away the warning label was the exact same thing as saying the flawed document underneath was now okay. She didn't see it as some small administrative cleanup. No, she saw that 2015 vote as the final illegal move that made the bad 2011 rule change official. All right, so that's her side of the story. But what about the HOA? How did they defend themselves? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. They didn't even try to argue that the original 2011 rule change was legit. Nope. Instead, their entire defense was built on a very sharp, very specific legal technicality. Their argument? That the 2015 vote to remove the warning was, legally, meaningless. And this really lays out the two sides of the argument so clearly. On one hand, you have Kesha Hodge saying, hey, when you withdrew that errata notice, you illegally ratified. You basically rubber-stamped the bad rule change from 2011. That action needs a 2/3 vote. But on the other side, the HOA is saying, hold on, that withdrawal was legally meaningless. It didn't validate or fix the flawed 2011 change. And since it wasn't a real rule change, no vote was required. It's a total clash of interpretations. And this quote from the HOA, it's the absolute core of their defense. They basically argued that the withdrawals were meaningless. Why? Because all those notices did was alert the public that there might be an issue. They had no legal effect on their own.
It's like they were saying, look, all we did was peel off the warning sticker. Peeling a warning sticker off a broken TV doesn't magically fix the TV. The 2011 rule change was still broken, and this 2015 action didn't change that fact one bit.
So, there you have it. Two completely different ways of looking at the exact same action. The homeowner sees an illegal rule change. The HOA sees a meaningless piece of paper. The big question is, what did the judge think? How is this all going to be decided?
The verdict? Complaint dismissed. Just like that. Kesha Hodge's complaint was completely thrown out. And you have to be asking, why? Well, the judge's reasoning here is a perfect example of legal precision.
Okay, let's break down the judge's logic. It's basically a four-step process. First, the judge pointed out that the complaint was laser-focused. It was only about the 2015 withdrawal, not the original bad rule change from 2011. That's a key detail. Second, the judge agreed with the HOA's view. The Notice of Errata was just a warning. It didn't legally cancel anything. Now here's step 3, the real aha moment. If putting on a warning label has no actual legal effect, then taking it off also has no legal effect. It doesn't approve or ratify or change a single thing, which leads directly to step 4. Since that 2015 withdrawal didn't legally amend any documents, it couldn't possibly be a violation of the rules that require a member vote for amendments.
And this final quote from the judge, Tammy L. Agonier, just nails it. Because the withdrawals had no legal effect amending the declaration, the vote of the board was not a violation of the declaration. I mean, it's just such a clean, direct, and powerful conclusion. The action had no legal teeth, so the board couldn't have violated the rules.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wow, that's a really fine legal point, a technicality. And you're absolutely right. It is. But that single fine point made all the difference. It's what decided the entire final binding outcome of this case.
And here's how it all became set in stone. The administrative law judge made the recommendation to dismiss the case back in April 2016. Then, there was this waiting period. The state's Department of Fire and Life Safety had until May 23rd to jump in and say, nope, we want to change this. But they did nothing. The deadline passed. So on June 3rd, the judge's decision was officially certified. It was now the final word.
So what's the big takeaway here? What did we learn? The case was dismissed, pure and simple, on a technicality. The homeowner's complaint was aimed at the wrong target. She went after the act of removing the warning label, the 2015 withdrawal. But the court decided that action was legally meaningless. She didn't go after the flawed document itself, that original, probably invalid rule change from all the way back in 2011.
And that leaves us with a pretty interesting question to think about, doesn't it? This whole case shows us that in the eyes of the law, just because something looks like a rule change doesn't mean it actually is one. It all came down to that crazy paper trail and whether one specific document had any real legal power. Which really makes you wonder, right? When is a rule change not really a rule change?